not... No... Another story? Fine. Hello everyone, welcome back to Storytime Theatre. I am Benny, and we're going to be Great, you put the book on my couch. Real funny. We're going to be reading the second chapter of Peter Pan. A little quick recap for those that were with us last time. Last we left our intrepid hero. He was gnashing his teeth at one Mrs. Darling. And we're about to find out what happens. So, let's go ahead on to chapter 2, The Shadow. Miss Darling screamed, and, as if in answer to the bell, the door opened, and Nana entered, returned from her evening out. She growled and sprang at the boy, who leapt lightly through the window. Again, Miss Darling screamed, this time in distress for him, for she thought he was killed, and she ran down into the street to look for his little body, but it was not there. And she looked up, and in the black night she could not see anything. But she saw a shooting star. She saw a shooting star. She returned to the nursery and found Nana with something in her mouth, which proved to be the boy's shadow. As he lifted at the window, Nana had closed it quickly. Too late to catch him, but his shadow had not had time to get out. Slam went the window, and snapped it off. Oh gosh, snapped off the... That's so much. Kids, watch out for your shadows. Ooh, they'd be snapping off. She decided to roll up the shadow and put it away carefully in the drawer until a fitting opportunity came to tell her husband. The opportunity came a week later on that never-to-be-forgotten Friday. Of course, it was a Friday. I ought to have been especially careful on Friday, she used to say afterwards to her husband. Wait, we just jumped. We've jumped. So we were with the shadow, and now we've... Why they gotta do that to us, man? I ought to have been especially careful on the Friday, she used to say afterwards to her husband. Well, perhaps Nana was on the other side of her, holding her hand. No, Miss Darling, he always said. I'm responsible for it. I, George Darling, did it. Mea culpa. Mea culpa. He had a classical education. They sat thus night after night recalling that fatal Friday, till every detail was stamped on in their brain, and came through the other side like the faces of a bad coinage. If only I had not accepted the invitation to dine at 27, Miss Darling said. If only I had not poured my medicine into Nana's bowl, said Mr. Darling.
If only I'd pretended to like the medicine,
said Nana with wet eyes. My liking for parties, George. My fatal gift of humor, dear.
My touchiness about trifles, dear master and mistress.
Then one or more of them would break down, all together. Nana, at the thought, it's true, they ought not have a dog for a nurse. Many a time it was Miss Darling who put the handkerchief to Nana's eyes. That fiend, Mr. Darling would cry, and Nana's bark was the echo of it. But Mr. Darling never upbraided Peter. There was something in the right-hand corner of her mouth that wouldn't let her. They would sit there in the empty nursery, recalling fondly every smallest detail of the dreadful evening. It had begun so uneventfully, so precisely like 100 other evenings, with Nana putting on the water for Michael's bath and carrying him to it on her back. I won't go to bed, Nana, he shouted, like one who still believed that he had the last word on the subject. I won't. Nana, it isn't even 6 o'clock yet. Oh dear, I shan't love you any more, Nana. I tell you, I won't be bathed. I won't. Then Miss Darling had to come in, wearing her white evening gown. She had dressed early because Wendy so loved to see her in her evening gown, with the necklace George had given her. She was wearing Wendy's bracelet on her arm. She asked to loan it to. Wendy so loved to lend her bracelet to her mother. She had found her 2 older children playing to be herself and father on the occasion of Wendy's birth, and John was saying, "I'm happy to inform you, Miss Darling, that you are now a mother," in just such a tone as Mr. Darling himself may have used on the real occasion. Wendy had danced with joy, just as the real Mrs. Darling must have done. Then John was born, with an extra pomp that he conceived due to the birth of a male. And Michael came from his bath to ask to be born also, and John brutally said that they did not want any more. Poor Michael. Imagine just, waltzing out of your bath, all relaxed and stuff, and your brother is basically like, no, we don't want another child. Ridiculousness. Back to the story. Michael had nearly cried. "Nobody wants me," he said, and of course the lady of the evening could not stand that. "I do," she says. "I so want a 3rd child." "Boy or girl?" said Michael, not too hopeful. "Boy." Then he leapt into her arms, such a little thing for Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Nana to recall now, but not so little if that was to be Michael's last night in the nursery. Then they would go on with their recollections. "It was then I rushed in like a tornado, wasn't it?" Mr. Darling would say, scorning himself. And indeed he had been like a tornado. Perhaps there was some excuse for him. He, too, had been dressing for the party, and all had gone well with him until it came to his tie. It is an astounding thing to have to tell, but this man thought he knew about stocks and shares, had no idea the true mystery of his tie. Sometimes the thing yielded to him without a contest, but there were occasions when it would have been better for the house to have swallowed his pride and used a made-up tie. Know your strengths, y'all. Know your strengths. This was such an occasion. He came rushing into the nursery with a crumpled little brute of a tie in his hand. "Why, what is the matter, father dear?" "Matter?" he yelled. He really yelled. "This tie will not tie." He became dangerously sarcastic. "Not round my neck, round the bedpost. Oh, yes, 20 times I have made it up around the bedpost, but around my neck, no. Oh, dear, begs to be excused." He went on sternly. "I warned you of this, mother, that unless this tie is round my neck, we don't go out to dinner tonight. And if I don't go out to dinner tonight, I never go to the office again. And if I don't go to the office again, you and I will starve, and our children will be flung out into the streets." A little melodramatic, but it's the first time I'm living for his moment. I will say that. Even then, Miss Darling was placid. "Let me try, dear," she said. And indeed, that was what he had come to ask her to do. And with her nice, cool hands, she tied his tie for him, while the children stood around to see their fate decided. Some men would have resented her being able to do it so easily. But Mr. Darling was far too fine a nature for that. He thanked her carelessly, at once forgot his rage, and in another moment was dancing round the room with Michael on his back. See, all you had to do was just ask your wife to help you out. But did he? No. I don't like him. I can't say that? Fine. But it's already out there. The romp had ended with the appearance of Nana, and most unlikely Mr. Darling collided against her, covering his trousers with hair. They were not only new trousers, but they were the first he had ever had with a braid on them. And he had to bite his lip to prevent the tears from coming. Of course, Mrs. Darling brushed him, but he began to talk again about its being a mistake to have a dog for a nurse. George, Nana is a treasure. No doubt, but I have an uneasy feeling that at times she looks upon the children as puppies. Oh dear, no, I feel sure she knows they have souls. Oh no, dear one, I feel sure she knows they have souls. Are we implying puppies don't have souls? Watch any puppy or kitten video on the internet, you will know. You will know they have souls. It was an opportunity his wife felt for telling him about the boy. At first he pooh-poohed the story, but he became thoughtful when she showed him the shadow. It is nobody I know, he said, examining it carefully. But he does look a scoundrel. We were still discussing it, you remember, said We were still discussing it, you remember, says Mr. Darling, when Nana came in with Michael's medicine. You will never carry a bottle in your mouth again, Nana, and it is all my fault. Strong man though he was, there is no doubt that he had behaved rather foolishly over the medicine. If he had a weakness, it was for thinking that all his life he had taken medicine boldly. And so now, when Michael dodged at the spoon in Nana's mouth, he had said reprovingly, Be a man, Michael. Won't! Michael cried naughtily. Mrs. Darling left the room to get a chocolate for him, and Mr. Darling thought this showed want of firmness. Mother, don't pamper him, he called after her. Michael, when I was your age, I took medicine without a murmur. I said, Thank you, kind parents, for giving me bottles to make me well. He really thought this was true, and Wendy, who was now in her nightgown, believed it also. And she said to encourage Michael, That medicine you sometimes take, Father, it's much nastier, isn't it? Ever so much nastier, Mr. Darling said bravely, and I would take it now as an example to you, Michael, if I hadn't lost the bottle. He had not exactly lost it. He had climbed in the dead of night to the top of the wardrobe and hidden it there. What he did not know was that the faithful Liza, The faithful Liza had found it and put it back on his washstand. I know where it is, Father, Wendy cried, always glad to be of service. I'll bring it. And she was off before he could stop her. Immediately his spirit sank in the strangest way. John, he said, shuddering, it's most beastly stuff. It's the nastiest, stickiest, it's that nasty, sticky, sweet kind. It will soon be over, Father, John said. It will soon be over, Father, John said cheerily. And then in rushed Wendy with the medicine and glass. I have been as quick as I could, she panted. You have been wonderfully quick, her father reported, with a vindictive politeness that was quite thrown away upon her. Michael first. Father first, said Michael, who was of a suspicious nature. I shall be sick, you know, Mr. Darling said threatening. I shall be sick, you know, Mr. Darling said threateningly. Come on, Father, said John. Hold your tongue, John, his father rapped out. Wendy was quite puzzled. I thought you took it quite easily, Father. That is not the point, he retorted. The point is that there is more in my glass than in Michael's spoon. His proud heart was nearly bursting. It isn't fair. I would say it, though it were with my last breath. It isn't fair. Father, I'm waiting, said Michael coldly. It's all very well to say you are waiting, so am I waiting.
Father's a cowardly custard.
So are you a cowardly custard.
I'm not frightened.
Neither am I frightened.
Well then, take it.
Well then you take it. Wendy had a splendid idea.
Why not both take it at the same time?
Certainly, said Mr. Darling. Are you ready, Michael? Wendy gave the words 1, 2, 3, and Michael took the medicine, but Mr. Darling slipped it behind his back. There was a yell of rage from Michael and an "Oh, Father!" exclamation from Wendy. What do you mean by "Oh, Father?" Mr. Darling demanded. Stop that row, Michael. I meant to take mine, but I missed it. You missed? Boy. I'm telling you, I don't like George. Look, I know I can't say that, but straight facts. Keep going. It was dreadful the way all three were looking. Just as if they did not admire... It was dreadful the way all three were looking at him. Just as if they did not admire him. Look here, all of you, he said entreatingly, as soon as Nana had gone into the bathroom. I have just thought of a splendid joke. I shall pour my medicine into Nana's bowl, and she will drink it, thinking it is milk. It was the color of milk, but the children did not have their father's sense of humor, and they looked at him reproachfully as he poured the medicine into Nana's bowl. What fun, he said doubtfully. They did not dare expose him when Mrs. Darling and Nana returned. Nana, good dog, he said, patting her. I have put a little milk in your bowl, Nana. Nana wagged her tail and ran to the medicine and began lapping it. Then she gave Mr. Darling such a look. Not an angry look. She showed him the great red tear that makes us all so sorry for noble dogs, and crept into her kennel. Mr. Darling was frightfully ashamed of himself, but he would not give in. In a horrid silence, Miss Darling smelt the bowl. Oh, George, she said, it's your medicine. Oh, George, she said, it's your medicine. It was only a joke, he roared, while she was comforting her boys, and Wendy hugged Nana. Much good, he said bitterly. Me? My wearing myself to the bone, my trying to be funny in this house. And still Wendy hugged Nana. That's right, he shouted. Coddle her. Nobody coddles me. Oh, dear, no. I'm the only breadwinner. Why should I be coddled? Why? George, Miss Darling entreated him. Not so loud. The servants will hear you. Somehow they had gotten into the way of calling Liza the servants. Let them, he answered recklessly. Bring in the whole world, but I refuse to allow that dog to lord in my nursery any hour longer. The children wept, and Anna ran to him beseechingly, but he waved her back. He felt he was a strong man again. In vain, he cried. The proper place for you is in the yard, and there you go to be tied up this instant. George, Miss Darling whispered, remember what I told you about the boy. Alas, he would not listen. He was determined to show who was master in the house, and when commands would not draw Nana from the kennel, he lured her out of it with honeyed words, and seizing her roughly, dragged her from the nursery. He was ashamed of himself, and yet he did it. It was all owing to himself. It was all owing to his too affectionate nature, which craved for admiration. When he had tied her up in the backyard, the wretched father went and sat in the passage, with his knuckles to his eyes. In the meantime, Mrs. Darling had put the children to bed, and in the unwonted silence lit their night lights. They could hear Nana barking, and John whimpered, It's because he is chaining her up in the yard. But Wendy was wiser. "That is not Nana's unhappy bark," she said, little guessing what was about to happen. "That is her bark when she smells danger." "Danger? Are you sure, Wendy?"
"Oh, yes."
Mrs. Darling quivered and went to the window. It was securely fastened. She looked out, and the night was peppered with stars. They were crowding round the house, as if curious to see what was going to take place there. But she did not notice this, nor that one or two of the smaller ones winked at her. Yet a nameless fear clutched at her heart and made her cry. Oh, how I wish that I wasn't going out to the party tonight. Even Michael, already half asleep, knew that she was perturbed, and he asked, "Can anything harm us, Mother, after the night lights are on?" "Nothing, precious," she said. "They are the eyes a mother leaves behind her." "Nothing, precious," she said. "They are the eyes a mother leaves behind to guard her children." She went from bed to bed singing enchantments over them, and little Michael flung his arms round her. "Mother," he cried, "I'm glad of you." They were the last words she was to hear from him for a long time. Number 27 was only a few yards distant, but there had been a slight fall of snow, and Father and Mother Darling picked their way over it deftly, not to soil their shoes. They were already the only persons in the street, and all the stars were watching them. Stars are beautiful, but they may not take an active part in anything. They must just look on forever. It is a punishment put on them for something they did so long ago that no star knows what it is. So the older ones have become glassy-eyed and seldom speak. Winking is their star language. But the little ones still wonder. They are not really friendly to Peter, who has a mischievous way of stealing up behind them and trying to blow them out. But they were so fond of fun that they were on his side tonight, and anxious to get the grown-ups out of the way. So as soon as the doors closed to 27 on Mr. and Mrs. Darling, there was a commotion in the firmament, and the smallest of all the stars in the Milky Way screamed out, "Now, Peter!" And that, my friends, is the end to Chapter 2 of Peter Pan, entitled The Shadow. I think we're going to get some action going on in here soon, so tune in next time when we head on to Chapter 3, Come Away. See you next time.